From the Austrian perspective, it should be pointed out that Judgment C-392/02 of the ECJ can be accepted even if we're not necessarily delighted, and we're going to be, in fact, complying with it in execution of customs law. It's true that, as Mr. Schönmark points, that in cases of Article 220, para 2b of the Customs Code, it's possible to allow for exemptions, and the operator doesn't pay tax to the member state, but the member state is still obliged to pay money to the Commission. And the other statement he made, I would take with a grain of thought as regards Article 220, para 2. I think that this leads to remarkable claims. I am a lawyer, and I must admit that the interpretation usually has to be interpreted within the meaning of its words, and I find it difficult to imagine that the European Commission, particularly that part of the Commission which is not with us here today, would really adopt the solution. I'd also like to add that other conclusions on general charges, for instance, security administration and so on, are, at least in my opinion, not going to be based on this judgment, which was adopted in November 2005. And since Austria joined the EU, I have been a member of the Own Resources Committee since Austria joined the EU in 1995, and the charges have been dealt with in this committee. So, we can't, in fact, base practice upon this judgment, at least as regards general charges. I agree that with Mr. Schönmarker that we have to base things not only on the wording of the directive, but also on the case law related to Article 220, para 2b. In other words, we have to stick strictly to the norms. In such cases of doubt, it may, in fact, arise that in the back of the minds of the administration, this is borne in consideration. However, this is impossible to measure, in my opinion. It is generally problematic, I think, and from the vantage of economic operators in particular, if we consider that customs law is to be uniformly applied by all member states. So, if we are supposed to execute the law on the basis of the law, one has to ensure equality of treatment throughout the member states. But if we can decide on to the benefit of an economic operator and provide for derogations, we know that some member states are more generous than others. And the Austrians have always insisted that we would be much less generous than the German administration. Further developments in this field will also depend, in my opinion, on whether the central offices of the member state will take account of this in the evaluations of the performance of the officers. After all, the officers have to conform with certain quality criteria. In Austria, we have a very streamlined customs administration with 1,700 officials, and I think the Germans have 41,000, which means that we are extremely streamlined in our administrations, and this means that both in the offices and in the Federal Ministry of Finances, there are going to be requirements for reporting, and if we were to reproduce this elsewhere, this would be problematic, because a direct error which is related to the application of Article 220 para 2b is impossible for me to foresee. Possibly an office might be confronted with a real problem of of own resources, while another office wouldn't. However, I don't believe that we're going to do this in Austria, which allows me to conclude that this directive will lead to an execution which is supposed to narrowly and closely follow the regulation. This will not necessarily lead to the deterioration of relations between customs administrations and economic operators. In fact, I know that in customs administrations we tend to apply the letter of the law. Thank you very much.